Hi, everyone. This is Betsy Wiersma, and I am the founder of the Global Sisterhood Network. And today we're at the Global Sisterhood Gathering. It is our very first in the entire world meeting of the minds of amazing women from all over the globe. And Lori Sparger is with us today. And the crowd is going wild. Oh! So this is fun because in this project, I went back through my Rolodex. Okay, I'm saying Rolodex because all the people who are over 50 know what I'm talking about. I went back through my Rolodex, which is probably now my phone, and looked at the brilliant women I have met over the years. And Lori is one of the superstars. She helps kind of run the place, I like to say, at Purdue University, which is my alma mater. So it's one of my favorite places to give and favorite places to go back. She's been involved with Purdue many, many years, and that's how I met her when she called on me when she was in the development office. And she has been involved with my sister in leadership roles around Purdue, so I knew her Purdue pedigree. But what I didn't know was the secret life of her books and her wonderful work in the world. So welcome, Lori. We are so happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Betsy. It's exciting to be able to join you because you are one of the favorite ladies that I have had the opportunity to meet by virtue of being at Purdue.
Oh, that is so nice. So Lori and I used to have lunch, and every year she was so gracious. She'd bring me a Purdue sweatshirt, or she'd bring when my daughter was young, she'd bring something for the kid. And, you know, she knew a way to a graduate's heart was through swag. She just knew those Purdue gifts keep on giving. Well, Lori, today you're here not wearing your Purdue development hat, but actually wearing your personal gifts in the world hat, which is what I'm so excited about, because I think the messages that you're addressing is what we all need. So start by first telling us a little bit about your background and how you found like your passion and your purpose in the world.
Thanks, Betsy. So I have been at Purdue for a long time and have had the opportunity to connect with a lot of great people along the way. And a few years ago, started a conversation that was originally a conversation about Purdue that kind of evolved into what became this book that I wrote, but also was a way to help other people and to help me think about the things that mattered most, the things that I liked doing the best, the things that I was the best at, and the things that really got me excited. And so it was a great process to be able to work through that, to think about what it was that I like to do. And, it's an interesting thing for me. We worked through that process, talked a lot about it. And there's some piece of it that was about really wanting to be the person at the table who sort of made everybody see things in a new way, to create something new, to create a new way of thinking about things, to create a new way of solving problems. And, and as I thought about it later, it was kind of funny because, there was this part of it that's about writing and about doing things in the world. And, and as I started to break it down and I thought about it, it was like, okay, well, that makes sense because, it's like how I like to bake, and I like to bake new things, and I take a recipe and the recipe is a starting point, but then you kind of riff on that and you do different kinds of things and create a spin and go, okay, well, that sounds interesting, but I want to do this other thing instead. And, and so I love to edit in all kinds of ways, right? So you edit a recipe, you edit a conversation, you edit a way of thinking about things. You take an idea and you tighten it and you pivot on it and you find your way to, to someplace new as a result of all of that.
Wow. Okay. So it's the most fun for me because now I'm like, I never really thought about pivoting and editing on an idea that it takes you in your journey, but I really get that. Tell me and tell everyone about your background. So did you, go to school, and did you have journalism? I mean, what led you to not only thinking differently, but in this point, actually, getting to writing? What is your educational background?
Right. So academically, I studied English at Purdue. I was a literature major, read a lot of books, did a lot of writing. But, as I've thought about it over the years, so that's part of it. And that definitely helped develop the writing even more and made that become more important. And so, first job out of college was working for a small weekly newspaper for a few years. But I think I've always liked to do things that, well, maybe to be a contrarian and do things that people said that I couldn't do. And so, so when I was in junior high, there was a club in 7th grade that was the sports club, and it was for boys. And I was like, okay, but why is it just for boys? I like sports. I know at the time, really football was my thing. And I was like, I know as much about football as any of these boys. And went to the teacher who was the advisor for that group and said, hey, I want to do this, but it's supposed to be for boys. Why? And he was like, oh, well, I don't know. It just always was. But if you want to do this, you can do this too. And I did, and it was fun. And it wasn't just boys anymore from that point forward. And so it was really cool to do that. And, in the moment, you don't think about those things. You're just like, hey, there's a thing I want to do.
Right.
And you ask to do it. Or, rather than just saying, oh, well, that's for the boys. So I guess girls can.
Wow. So I wrote down break the always was. You
Right.
broke the always was, which is great. I notice in our generation, we're similar in age. We've been blessed because of all the women who have come before us. And we've had to sometimes be the trailblazer like you did there and say, is football only for boys? And I know once in a while you see a national news story about a fantastic girl on a football team. I think we're exceedingly growing in the opportunity for women. I know a lot about the trades now. Right now, if my daughter was smart when she gets out of high school, she would be a plumber because they need people in the trade so badly. They'll pay for your college, they'll pay for your training. It's really amazing. So I'm not surprised that you were the girl in the football club because I know you know a lot about those sports. All right, so now you've worked for a big academic institution, and now you're kind of a rebel, which I know that in your personality, and a trailblazer. Tell us about the book, and we're going to talk about 3 things you learned, or even 3 key principles of what the book's about. So tell us a little bit about the book, and then let's go through 3 really cool principles to share.
Right. So, so the book was interesting. I was working on a project with a fellow Purdue alum, and we had a conversation about, a silly, funny little soap opera fan fiction that I had been writing that almost nobody knew about, like 7 people in the world knew. And for whatever reason, we were at Harry's, right? Campus bar at Purdue. And I'm like, yeah, so there's this thing I'm doing, told him about it. And he sent an email and, was working with me on this Purdue project and said, okay, so if I help you with this project, will you help me finish my half-written book? And in an email exchange. And I was like, sure, why not? That sounds like fun. Sort of thought it was a nothing and that it would just go away and whatnot. And, and I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months later, the conversation continued. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is a real thing. Well, that's interesting. And met for the first time to talk about his half-written book. It was 10 words and some really bad drawings on a piece of paper. It's sort of kind of not really half-written yet.
Yeah, kind of not half-written. Yeah, I got that.
But was this interesting idea. And, and he was here on campus for a couple of days and had a bunch of conversations over a couple of days. And I had a work trip to Washington, D.C. and went to D.C. And on the flight, I wrote an outline for the book. I'm like, okay, wait, I see how all these stars are going to align. I totally get this. And sent it back to him. And it was a couple of days before he looked at it. And I remember I was driving down the road reading on my phone, which you should never do. There's a rule. Don't do that. Bad. But I was. And, and his first sentence was something like, holy cow, Batman, I love it. And like instantly tears in my eyes. I was so excited that, that he was happy with it. And, it turned out that I think there were 2 chapters that we flipped, one thing that we ended up not doing, but 95% of what was on that piece of paper was sort of our North Star and how we worked through the process of writing this book.
Wow.
So we spent, every Sunday we would talk on the phone and go through and kind of ended up evolving, deciding to do a series of interviews, shared it with some people, got some feedback along the way. But it was always very interesting because I had never done this before. And I was like, really, you're completely crazy because this is like your baby and I have no idea why you want me to do this with you. But, but we got along beautifully. We had a lot of trust. We kept going. I remember a point that one of his friends, not my friends, had read the book and we met in person and we're talking and he was talking about a really early first draft and said, well, what else have you written? I was like, well, nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. I said, yeah, well, Todd's just crazy. I don't know why he asked me to do this, but no, I haven't ever written anything before. So we kind of progressed through writing and all of that, and got to a point of, okay, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to try and pitch this to a publishing house? How are we going to move forward from this point? And it was kind of interesting. We both kind of have control issues and ended up deciding, well, we're going to do it ourselves. That we didn't want to sort of deal with a publisher. We didn't want to to compromise what we wanted to write, to alter the timeline dramatically, because that would add so much more time to the process of even getting it published. And so we just kind of talked about it and said, okay, well, let's do it ourselves. And at that point I was like, okay, crap, I got to figure out how to do this. And and found some books. I had done some printing work before, but I had never done anything like this. And so there was this process of writing and figuring it all out that was exciting and daunting and interesting. But then there was this thing that I had said, yes, we're going to just do it ourselves. We can do this. And then figuring out how on earth that was going to work. And so it was really, really interesting, really fun. It was probably one of the crazier things I've ever done, because really I kind of had no idea how to do it when I promised I was going to do it.
What's interesting is many people watching this, and many people that are part of my Camp Experience network here in Colorado, people always say, I got to get my book out. I got to get my book out. But it's interesting in your story that your book was out in the world, and then it came to you through an acquaintance or a friend. And then I like when you talk about in the process, here was like this little dangly of an idea, but then it reoccurred and it turned out something real. And then you had points along the way that you noticed if it was working, if the karma was good, if the guy was good to work for, if he did what he said he was going to do, lots of things.
Right.
And then you had your explorer part where you had to learn something new. So in that whole journey, Lori, of having this book, this successful, wonderful book, do you want to talk about 3 things you learned in the journey, or do you want to tell us 3 tenets from the book?
Well, so let's try this. And I was thinking about this last night and kind of what I thought mattered. And I think it's an interesting thing when you think about women and how we operate in the world, right? Because, you can argue the language till the end of the day, but the fact of the matter is that physiologically we are in many ways a weaker sex, right? And yet we choose to go out into the world without a thought for that. We move through the spaces that we're in without regard for the fact that, in fact, we are the weaker sex. But then when you think about what we do in our careers, we totally dial it back, right? There was an HR study that was done several years ago that said when a job's being posted, a man will look at it, and if he thinks that he meets 60% of the qualifications, he'll apply. And if a woman is looking at the same job, she won't apply unless she thinks she meets every single bullet.
Right. I've heard that study. Right.
Every single bit of it. And it's an interesting thing, because on the one hand, that we move through this world is this fierce thing, right? That we just go out there and tackle this world in which we are living in a way that assumes that we're going to conquer it. And yet we don't do the same thing in our careers. And I think that's interesting. I think it's kind of unfortunate that we spend too much time waiting to be asked rather than asking. And
okay, so that's number 1.
So I think that's number 1. It is that if you want something, ask.
Okay.
Right? We don't do that enough. I think another thing that's really important, and this is a piece from the book, is that there's a whole chapter that riffs on the notion that nobody cares. Nobody cares what you want. Not your mom, not your spouse, definitely not your employer. And I think, and it's kind of a little bit edgy on purpose, because what it really means, what nobody cares means, is that nobody cares as much as you. Nobody knows really what's in your head. Nobody knows really what you want, really what's going to move you. And nobody is ever going to be as invested in it as you are, right? Your mom cares if you're happy. but not, not in exactly the same way. And so it's all about taking responsibility, about taking responsibility for going after what we want, for recognizing what we're good at, for finding our place in the world and moving it forward in a way that is personally meaningful.
Awesome. I love that. I'm gonna interact on that for a minute because I was getting kind of my dander up as the defender of women, saying women is the weaker sex. But my point might be weaker in the past definition of what is strong, right?
Well, I think that's very true.
Yeah, because in the day it was like, what can you lift? You're a caveman. I can bring home the elk, right? And the women were at the fire. But I'm not sure in today's day where technology and emotional intelligence, EQ and IQ, but EQ is so important, and relationship building and collaboration and multitasking. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure as these components of success become more important, that weaker might not be redefined, and perhaps that's your next book. I don't know, just saying. Just say it. It starts as an idea. Okay, so number one, if you want something, ask. I got that. Number two, nobody cares as much as you. And then tell us, what is your number three?
And what is number three? Number three is be fearless, right? Is don't wait until you think you know all of the answers, because you'll be amazed at what you can figure out along the way.
I love that. I love that. Well, I do some art these days, and you'll have to catch up with me on that. But I think be fearless might be one of my themes I might steal for some art, because that is an awesome mantra for all of us. And I know you're fearless as you go out and represent the university. And it's so wonderful that you've produced this book that the world can know. Tell us the name of the book.
The book is called Be More, Find Your Truth, Tell Your Story, and Get What You Want Out of Life.
There you go. And who doesn't want to say yes to all those things?
Exactly.
I always want to be more. And thank you so much for sharing this. So as I briefed you, this is my favorite part. Now, Lori's going to make her global statement to women of the world. And, it's fun for me to see what people have to say. So speak into the hearts and minds of these women, Lori.
Oh gosh, so this is so hard. I think that, so we talked about this idea of the weaker sex. And I think that we need to embrace who we are. We need to embrace our vulnerability and recognize that doing that can be our greatest strengths of all, because it allows us to connect with people on such a deep level, to be authentic, and to use that as a way to move through the world and make a difference.
I love that. See, that was absolutely perfect. There's no need for worry about that. Well, I know you are dedicated to not only helping Purdue, but helping women and helping people in the world be more. And that is a wonderful calling. And I just know this is the beginning of many, many things you have to say that are awesome, because you're a wonderful writer and a great rule breaker. And I'm so glad that you've broken rules and figured it all out. And please, everyone, when you've enjoyed this interview, see all of Lori's contact information right on this page. You can see how to get the book, Be More. You can see about booking her as a speaker. She does speaking gigs. She can come to your conference for men and women. And she has all kinds of resources for that. And then go over in the gifts bag where she shares her gifts and see what wonderful things she has in the gifts bag for you to download and enjoy and really savor meeting her. So Lori, we are so happy to have a fellow Boiler on the screen with me. Boiler up, sister friend.
All right, and hail Purdue.
Hail Purdue. And if anyone's looking for a great university for your child, or you'd like to go back to grad school, look at Purdue University in lovely West Lafayette, Indiana, here in the United States of America. A wonderful program on so many levels of veterinary medicine and business. And I came through more of a writing and creative humanities degree, and it really equipped me for everything that I've ever been. I really credit Purdue University for a wonderful place to start. So boiler up, sister friend.
All right. Thank you so much. Lots of fun.
Bye.